This week on His Dark Materials, there was Malice in Wonderland. Let's get started. Welcome to Thumb Together TV. My name is Andrew Fantasia. Today we're going to be talking about His Dark Materials Season 2, Episode 6, Malice, together. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well, or I will walk headfirst into a valley of the specters and I shall fear all kinds of evil and probably get my soul ripped out of my body. I don't really know what the specters do, but it seems invasive. On this week's episode, Malice, it felt a lot like the first episode of Season 2, where it was very much an episode of getting all the little chess pieces to sort of scoot into the right position for the big climactic finale, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have only 2 episodes left, if not 1. This is a very short season, so we are barreling headfirst towards that finale, and in order to do that, we have to get some characters in the proper spots. Like, for example, Mr. Jopari and my boy Lee Scoresby up there in that balloon. They're in the middle of this raging thunderstorm, and Jopari is just an eerie, he's a creepy dude, man. The way that he's being played, he's just somebody that I'd be like, okay, buddy, I'm keeping my distance from you, and not just because there's a pandemic going on. Lee Scoresby, on the other hand, I have all kinds of love for. I mean, this dude is just, I know what's coming in the story, so I'm tensing up. Parts of my body that you don't want to know about are clenching when I think about what's going to happen to Lee Scoresby, but we'll get there when we get there. I don't want to spoil nothing because his story takes an interesting turn. But regardless, they're being chased by the Magisterium, so Jopari makes a storm to cover their tracks or help them escape. I don't really know the point of what he's doing, but he's doing some shaman magic, and they get shot down by a rifle, and the episode ends with them crashing into the hills. And if we trickle on over to the world of Lyra and Will for a moment, this is a whole other story. Lyra and Will are set upon by the witches, specifically Serafina Pekkala, the best witch, because she's the one witch from the books that I remember. But Serafina looks at Will's hand and is like, damn kid, this is a bad wound. What are you doing walking around? And she tends to his hand with their magic, but it's not quite enough. And then as they continue their journey through the hills, I gotta be honest, I totally blank on where they're going. I think the witches are taking them to a safe haven. I really don't remember where they're headed. But at least I have more peace of mind knowing that the witches are there to protect them. And they finally use some kind of really big elaborate chant circle on Will's hand that involves a whole lot of whispering. It's very Tolkien-esque magic. It's a lot of and it works. And it works enough to get Will back on his feet and being like, hey, my fingers aren't bleeding anymore. Let's continue walking. And more importantly, we see the first signs of what could possibly be a budding romance between Lyra and Will. Just a little bud. Just a tiny dewdrop on a branch as they sit on this cliff, which, P.S., I don't know what it is with people who aren't, freaked out by heights, but there is no way I would be sitting that comfortably on a cliff edge that high. No thank you. Get away from there, please. But as they're sitting there having this conversation in a totally irresponsible and dangerous location, it sounds like, and it looks like, they're starting to look at one another in a way that's different than just, this is my pal that I met in this floating city. Their bond is strengthening. And as we go deeper into this story, that bond will only get stronger. Speaking of Lyra, Fra Pavel, who used his own alethiometer, checked in on Lyra and ended up with an interesting answer. Apparently, even though they don't say it out loud in this episode, Lyra is to be in the position of Eve. Remember how the dust told Mary Malone that she was supposed to be the serpent? Well, in the story of Adam and Eve, you kind of need the 2 leading roles, and it looks like Lyra is going to fill in the most important of those roles. Again, they didn't say Eve out loud, but it's pretty much guaranteed that that's what they're talking about. And of course, this freaks out all the priests of the Magisterium to the effect where our trigger-happy new cardinal decides that getting Lyra is of the utmost importance when they have this big evil conclave in their big evil church room. I don't see any chairs in that church. Does anybody sit down? It's mostly just big wooden rooms with nothing in them and like a skylight. What a weird world. Now, of course, you can't have Adam and Eve without the serpent, and Mary Malone, who is apparently our serpent, even though she is a hero of this story, has found her way into Chitagaze, as we saw last week, and now she's just exploring, and she's having a great old time. The specters aren't going anywhere near her. In fact, it looks like something else some other supernatural entity is near her, doesn't it? It's very brief, and it's kind of hard to make out, but as she's sitting on this rowboat looking out over the ocean, what appears in the air behind her? This strange golden shimmer that looks remarkably like an angel. And now this screenshot doesn't do it a whole lot of justice, but this is the best one I could find of that one little moment as those two girls are looking on. Mary Malone seems to be, I want to say, protected by some kind of guardian angel spirit that's hovering just behind her. And Mary doesn't seem to notice its presence, but she does feel an unearthly sense of calm, even though she's in another world where she can't see anybody else and she might not be able to survive for much longer. But here is where we get what I think might be my favorite addition they've made so far to the plot. Because as far as I remember, this upcoming scene is not in the books. And if I'm wrong, sue me. But Mary bumps into Lyanna Stark and her little blonde friend, and there's like this exchange of tension because that always happens with those two. And then Mary, of course, being the kind soul that she is, she's like, oh my God, you poor kids, here's a chocolate bar, it looked like. I don't know what it was. She said it's full of sugar, so I'm going with a crackle. And the kids take it and they're grateful, and they have a little chat, and they tell Mary about how all the grown-ups went away into the hills somewhere because the specters kept killing all of them, and now they're stuck here with no grown-ups and nobody to take care of them. And then we get this moment that is one of the most emotional moments of this series, man, where this blonde girl, who, I'm sorry, but her name escapes me. I always just call her Lyanna Mormont's friend, who I think I even referred to as Lyanna Stark just a minute ago, in which case, wow, I'm drunk. But Lyanna's blonde friend kind of steps forward and looks at Mary and says, could I please have a hug? And Mary looks at this kid, and I'm looking at this kid and I'm like, oh my God, that is heartbreaking. These children have been on their own for who knows how long. She just wants an adult to hug her and tell her that everything's going to be okay. And that's exactly what happens. And she hugs this kid, and this girl's not letting go. And Lyanna's like, oh, you can take care of us if you want. You know, you can give us baths and tell us what to do. We wouldn't mind, honest. And this just breaks your heart in two. And you can see it on Mary's face where she's like, I got a job to do. I can't stay here and be your den mother. And the kid's shoulders just slump, and they're immediately crestfallen. So Mary makes the decision. And again, I am 99% certain that this decision was not made in the books, so this is a really interesting turn, where she says, hey, wait, girls, come with me, we'll go into the mountains, we'll find all the adults. This is one of my favorite plot points that happened this season, because if we are, in fact, getting more of these kids than we got in the books, I'm all for it. I'm sorry if this clapping is making your audio go ballistic, but yes, more of this. Meanwhile, in another part of Cittàgazze, Mrs. Coulter and Lord Boreal have stumbled across the Tower of Angels, and they've also stumbled across two of the shocking moments of this season. Mrs. Coulter, it turns out, is so damn powerful and has such a strong mental fortitude that she was able to wade through a cluster of specters without being harmed, and even turning them away with her own hands, herding them out of her field of vision, simply out of the force of her sheer determination. This woman is continuously proving to be one of the most badass villains ever. Now, in her own words, she said, the specters hunt what makes us human, so I suppressed that. I pushed it down and ignored everything human about me and just walked through them, I guess, almost robotically, which is much easier said than done, Mrs. Coulter, but if anybody can do it, it's you. I believe you. I just want to know what kind of unhealthy person it takes to be able to do that without, from the looks of things, breaking a sweat. I got some serious Mr. Echo and Smoke Monster vibes from this scene, by the way. But damn, Mrs. Coulter is so badass. Even the monkey was afraid, but she just played it cool. And because of that, they had sort of free reign of the main Cittàgazze Plaza. The specters are gone, at least for the time being. But you know who else is gone? Lord Boreal. Because he has outlived his usefulness, according to Coulter. And she slips a little bit of poison in his wine, and that's it for him. What I find so interesting about this is you really get a sense of the hierarchy of the villains on this show. In season 1, when Boreal was sort of terrorizing Will and his mother, you got this really intense, intimidating vibe from the man as he's sitting there, you know, in his very expensive car with his very expensive suit, just watching and waiting and seeing what Will and his mother do in their daily lives. We felt that he was violating their privacy. He was a genuinely scary villain. And then as soon as you pair him up with Mrs. Coulter, you understand very quickly that he is small potatoes, to the point where they even bring that up in this episode, where he refers to them as equals, and she kind of laughs, and she's like, oh, equals, huh? And once he's sitting there choking out on his own poison, she just tells him straight up, honey, you were never my equal. Now don't fight it. Just go. And he dies. And that is, Mrs. Coulter, you are cold. Your name should be Mrs. Colder. Well, that's as bad a joke as I can make. I better wrap it up before things get worse. But that's the end of Lord Boreal. What a fascinating villain he turned out to be. He really did, I think, fool himself into believing he was deeply in love with Mrs. Coulter. Maybe he was in a sense. I think it was more lust than anything else. That tear that trickled down his face just as he shed his mortal coil really kind of humanized him, to the point where we're like, too bad, guy. I'd feel sorrier for you if you weren't, one of the villains, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Sometimes we just gotta drink that poison. But anyway, that has been His Dark Materials Malice, and there certainly was a lot of that. I hope Lee Scoresby and Joe Parry are okay, because that balloon landing did not look smooth, but we'll find out in a week's time, which puts us past Christmas. So if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. If you don't, happy December holidays to you anyway. I hope you have a great time and I hope you stay safe. I will see you here next time, and until then, adios.